Hello and welcome to the 27th Scouching Report for the 2020 NHL Draft. Today we're going to be looking at Anton Johannesson of HV71's junior team over in Sweden. Johannesson is one of the biggest enigmas available in this year's NHL Draft. He was paired almost every shift with a player who was very likely to go in the first round of this year's draft, Emil Andre, and this is also a player who has played about 50 games over the last 2 seasons combined. But I really came away feeling that Emil Andre might be buoyed a little bit by Anton Johannesson's talent from the games that I've seen. And considering Anton Johannesson is ranked 31st amongst European skaters according to NHL Central Scouting, really leads me to believe that there might be some really significant value if you draft this player somewhere in the draft around the middle rounds. So if you've never seen a Scouching Report before, the way that we break down a player is we look at 5 separate categories: think, move, get, pass, and shoot. Within each one of these categories, we give them a number and a letter grade, where the number indicates the overall tier of talent I saw across the 7 games I tracked, and the letter indicates the overall consistency within that tier that I saw. First, we look at the think category, and right from the get-go, through every game that I watched, it is so clearly, blatantly obvious that this is a player that is defined by his passing game. All over the ice, smart, quick, patient passing decisions were made by Johannesson, simple little passing plays, complex stretch passes, and doing so in all 3 zones were all hallmarks of Johannesson's game every single game I tracked him. There was only 1 game of his that I tracked this season where he had fewer than 30 pass attempts, and the last game of the year that I tracked of his, he went over 40 pass attempts in a game. It is extremely rare for me to find a player that makes pass attempts more than 30 times in a game, let alone 40. He generates pressure through his breakout passing both aggressively and conservatively in a weird way, and he keeps rush patterns fluid and unpredictable by sending breakout passes up the boards and up the middle of the ice with a ton of efficiency. And with undersized defensemen, the criticisms always start on the defensive side of the game. But with Johannesson, I always felt that positionally speaking, he was a very reliable player as a defenseman. In front of the net, he at least tries to tie sticks up, and his rush defense is actually pretty good. He's able to maintain gaps very well and let opposing rushes come to him very slowly at his defensive blue line quite often. And I constantly felt that this was a player who was small but did what he could to overcome the limitations of his size. He felt very much like a highly intelligent anticipator of opposing breakouts. He's able to find open ice in the neutral zone and basically dare the opposing team to try to get breakout passes through him. He'd either glove these pass attempts down and stop the breakout right when it starts, or just get in the way of the pass reception and try to break up play from there. In the offensive zone, Johannesson is able to pinch up quite well, but he's not such an aggressive defenseman in the offensive zone that he often makes himself a liability positionally. But there are times when things might fall apart a little bit. He could try to chase the aggressive play a little bit too often and ignore more conservative options with his passing. There were also quite a few instances where I found that Johannesson was caught puck watching on the defensive side of the game and completely lose track of where opponents might be in their rush. So in the think category, I'm giving Johannesson a 1D. I really do believe that there is a chance that this player could become an excellent puck-moving defenseman through his passing. At times, his thought processes and pass attempts were absolutely brilliant, being able to start breakouts aggressively but with tremendous amounts of control, and at other times, I felt that he was a shockingly reckless puck-moving defenseman. And while he'd hit on his riskier breakout options and stretch passes more often than not, I would like to see him employ more conservative passing more often. Even though he was passing the puck conservatively a tremendous amount, you really don't want to be making those passing decisions that hand the puck right over to the opposing team, especially on your own defensive blue line. You're not drafting Anton Johannesson for his defensive play. He could misread rushes, and he doesn't really have the straight line speed quite yet to really close down those gaps, chase down those rushes, and get himself involved defensively from there. Next, we go to the move category, and I briefly alluded to it just in the last category there, but there isn't really a super high-end top gear in a straight line for Anton Johannesson here. But that doesn't mean that he's a bad skater. He's a very shifty and fluid player who's mobile in all directions. I never felt that his skating was so underwhelming that I felt that he could never project as a defenseman. He's able to pivot well and cover the ice extremely effectively in all 4 directions, especially for a 5'9" defenseman. And he's also completely unafraid to jump into the offensive zone with a pretty impressive first couple of steps that can generate some speed there. He can get moving quickly, identifying open space where he can skate with the puck or even without it, and his ability to attack dangerous areas both with the puck and without it is unlike many defensemen that I've tracked this season. So while I wouldn't categorize Johannesson as fast, I certainly would categorize him as mobile, and he's able to shake off opposing defenses really well at the blue line and open up space for himself and create passing options. His game is about passing, and using his skill and mobility and shiftiness on his feet, he's able to keep defenders at bay and enable offensive cycles at an extremely high level. But everything is not rosy with Anton Johannesson, and this is the area of the game where that really starts to show itself. When it comes to applying pressure to Anton Johannesson when the puck is on his own stick, the guy is just not very reliable. Fighting through pressure is almost a non-existent trait of his game, and he can be removed from play really easily. Pucks would just get stripped off of him with almost no effort. But a lot of this goes back to his lack of strength on his frame and the fact that he just hasn't played a ton of games against under 20 competition. So this might be a sign of just how much of a gamble this player might be in the draft. So in the move category, I'm giving Johannesson a 2A. He's a very fluid and mobile skater, even though there are some really blatantly clear weaknesses once pressure starts to get applied to him. And at his core, Johannesson is a two-faced player. He can be a delightful player to watch skate when he's away from puck play. He can be an exciting player to watch when the puck is on his own stick, especially in the offensive zone. But under pressure, it felt like he could get overwhelmed and removed from play far too easily. So to me, if Anton Johannesson is going to project to the North American game, strength is going to need to be a major component of his development. And without it, I'm not really certain that he'll ever translate to North American hockey, let alone the NHL. Building more raw speed in a straight line and putting more strength on his frame could make him a potentially lethal offensive defenseman. And considering he's still in the process of getting his feet set and playing a full season, something he has not done for 2 seasons, I think there's potential, no matter how limited it might be to some, that Anton Johannesson could become a special offensive defenseman one day. Next we go to the get category. You're just not drafting Anton Johannesson for his defensive play in his defensive zone. He's a fluid skater, able to maintain gaps very well, monitor opposing rushers, break up play with his stick, but when things get physical, a lot of the time I felt he could be borderline useless. But in the neutral zone, he's happy to pinch up a little bit higher and try to stop breakouts right when they start. He's an intelligent gap manager who's able to let opponents come to him at a very solid rate, better than a lot of North American defenders that I've seen this season. And as mentioned before, he tracks opposing breakouts in the neutral zone extremely well. To me, it particularly doesn't matter how you stop an opposing team's breakout. To me, the best defensemen are the ones who never play in the defensive zone. And if Anton Johannesson's ability to track opposing breakouts through the neutral zone, anticipate where passes are going so he can avoid the physical encounter in the first place, then I don't really see what the problem is. It's risky, but the percentage of opposing transitions coming his way done with control was much better than what I expected going into this tracking experience, below 50%. But more often than not, I felt that Johannesson was a player that had one layer of defense, and if you got through that one layer of defense, it was home free. He's a great stick checker, great gap manager, but if you can manage to get around him, he doesn't really have the raw speed to keep up with that rush. His mobility is good, but he could get caught pivoting a little bit too early and get left behind on a rush. And when things are really hemmed in his own zone on defensive cycles, I felt that there just isn't really enough to say that he's projectable as any kind of reliable defensive player down the road. But if his play on defensive rushes stays at a high level, then it should be able to mitigate his weaknesses in the defensive zone. So in the get category, I'm giving Johannesson a 3C. I think this all indicates how unusual of a player Anton Johannesson is. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how he develops over the next little while. I found that his transition defense was much better than I anticipated, but his play in the defensive end, especially when it came time to get physical in front of the net or along the boards, it was almost non-existent far too often. But if you get past that one layer of defense, he can be a player that just gets left behind on opposing rushes and lets far too much happen deep in the defensive zone that you just don't want to see. Next we go to the pass category, and this is not only Anton Johannesson's bread and butter of his game, but it's very nearly the entire meal you eat at the restaurant. And most nights, from what I saw, the meal is borderline Michelin star rated. Other nights, you want to call the city and have them shut down the restaurant for the rest of the evening. Anton Johannesson not only attempted more passes than everyone else I've tracked this season, but the number of pass attempts he made per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 was 24% higher than the second-ranked player I've tracked. And in terms of completing passes, he's completed more passes per 60 minutes at 5-on-5 than all but one player I have tracked all season has attempted. He uses his skating to maneuver around the offensive zone and uses his shifty nature to keep defenses on their heels so he can open up passing options. And he's able to send passes to medium and high danger areas at the highest rate of any defenseman I've tracked this year. The only other player I've tracked that can hold a candle to him is Samuel Konazko, who plays in Finland. And those players send passes to medium and high danger areas 41% more often than the third-ranked player in this category, Jake Sanderson, a player who might be gone in the top 10 of this year's draft. And taking this a step further, Anton Johannesson sends more passes to the high and medium danger areas of the ice than 18 of the 56 forwards I've tracked this season. That is ridiculous. His ability to step up in the offensive zone without pinching too far, look for a cross-ice passing option or a passing option up the middle of the ice is unparalleled. And I felt that of all the defensemen I've tracked this year, looking for those risky passing breakout options and actually connecting on them was something he did very effectively. And at the offensive blue line, I felt that his ability to adapt to pressure completely did a 180, as he's able to step up into pressure scenarios and defuse that pressure immediately by sending pucks to line mates along the boards. And this is more of a tactical note. While many of his pass attempts were going D to D and more simple passing plays that just keep the puck in motion, personally, I don't see that as a bad thing, and he was attempting passes at such an overwhelming rate compared to even other European defensemen that I've tracked that it really feels like this is still something that is special and unique in this draft class. I always felt that Anton Johannesson wasn't really passing just to pad his pass attempt numbers. I felt that he played with a purpose, and I personally don't feel that there's anything wrong with a team deploying their players, looking for open ice through their passing and waiting and being patient to look for the right pass attempts into the neutral zone and through into the offensive zone. But there are times when you're watching Anton Johannesson play hockey and you cannot believe what you're seeing with your own eyes. Someone who passes the puck as much as Anton Johannesson does is bound to make mistakes, and I think that the mistakes overshadow the positives in a lot of people's eyes. But when those mistakes were made, they at times were horrific, especially in the defensive zone. Sending passes into the neutral zone from deep in the defensive zone or sending passes up the middle of the ice can really do a good job of pushing pucks into the offensive zone and generating offense. But when his vision leads him astray and he sends passes to the wrong team, they can be a complete disaster scenario. And I also felt that when it came time for Johannesson to make little passes on his backhand, the lack of strength on his frame really showed there as well, with some very poor pass attempts done on his backhand. But when you look at dangerous shot differentials when Johannesson was on the ice, the offensive boost he gives to the team far outweighs the defensive decreases that he causes. So in the pass category, I'm giving Johannesson a 1C. Every bone in my body wanted to give him a 1F in this category, but most of the time his passing is so rock solid and reliable that you can forgive the odd horrible mistake. Obviously you want those horrible mistakes to go down in frequency over the years, and I think they will. But combining the number of pass attempts that he takes and the fact that he completed 78% of those pass attempts is such an outlier that to me it has to be notable. He is unlike any player, especially defensemen, that I have tracked in this category. And it's also very important to remember that Anton Johannesson has only played 28 games at the under 20 level in Sweden. That is about the length of half of one full season. And though there are clear weaknesses in this category, I think that with another year at the under 20 level to develop, with a couple of games in the SHL just to get his feet wet, and if you let him learn from the mistakes that he makes through his risky and aggressive approach from time to time, I think that there could be a tremendous quarterback defenseman here that can hurl pucks all over the ice. Next we go to the shoot category, and you might think offensive defenseman shoots lots, but with Anton Johannesson that is definitely not the case. He's a player that is defined by his passing game. He does pick his spots well to step up into dangerous areas and get a few shot attempts here and there from those areas. He can participate in offensive rushes and get himself into higher danger areas where I did track the odd shot attempt, but in terms of total shot attempts per 60 minutes, he was 20th of 27 defenders that I've tracked. But to me, that's not a bad thing. I'm always wary of defensemen who rely on throwing pucks at the net aimlessly. And Johannesson is a player that focuses more on finding defense partners and line mates to get clean passes to around the offensive zone. He's a player where the play more flows through him as a quarterback rather than an offensive weapon putting pucks on net himself. So it's hard for me to really evaluate this category. I found that his wrist shot was fine, but there wasn't really that power play slap shot type offensive defenseman here. So in the shoot category, I'm giving Anton Johannesson a 2C. This is a really tough one for me to really rate, and I don't really think that his shooting game is going to be a major part of his game moving forward. But with a bit more strength on his frame and maybe some more training in his shot quality, his natural instinct to step up into the offensive zone intelligently a little bit more often could make him more of a goal scorer. But I'm more interested in his ability to quarterback an offense through his passing. So the way we wrap up these reports is we look at the best part of a player's game, the good part of a player's game, and the not so good part of a player's game. The best part of Anton Johannesson's game is that he can just hurl pucks around the ice in all three zones and in all kinds of different directions, unlike anyone I've tracked in this year's draft. The lead that he has on the rest of the pack in attempted passes, completed passes, and outside of Samuel Konazko, dangerous passes, is simply ridiculous. He quarterbacks offenses exceptionally well, and he can get pucks into the neutral zone through aggressive or conservative passing used interchangeably. And I often felt that the stretch passes he made were done with purpose and done at the correct times to ensure that they're not broken up. He did screw it up from time to time, and it was awful to see, but this is a player where, to me, you have to see the forest through the trees and really understand what it is he's trying to do when he's out there on the ice. The good part of Johannesson's game is his overall mobility and shiftiness on his feet. Especially in the offensive zone, I felt that he could be a player that really keeps defenses on their heels with his unpredictability and his passing ability. He can create space for himself by jumping up into the offensive zone with the puck on his own stick without pinching so far that he becomes a positional liability, and when he's walking a blue line, he covers a lot of ice very efficiently, and he's able to go outside in from the boards with the puck on his own stick and inside out as well. This is a very mobile and fun defenseman to watch play, especially in the offensive zone. The not so good part to me isn't the passing decisions, but it's more about how he deals with physical pressure that will hold him back from North American success. Once you start applying pressure to Anton Johannesson, especially in the defensive zone, the guy can fold like a lawn chair. I'm of the belief that the poor passing decisions are linked more to his unfamiliarity at the under 20 level, and over the next few years, whether it's at the under 20, Allsvenskan, or even the SHL level, these things will get ironed out and his passing game should translate a little bit better. But what I am concerned about is the combination of a lack of physical strength, having really only one layer of defensive ability, and his ineffectivity dealing with pressure, especially in the defensive end. So without some serious improvements to his strength and some serious time in the video room to really analyze how he plays his game, I'm really questioning how well his game will translate. But boy, if it does, this guy is going to be a lot of fun to watch. So overall, I can't help but give Anton Johannesson a 1F. I really don't think that there's any in-between gray area with him as an NHL player. He's either going to make it and be awesome, or not make it and be pretty good in Sweden. But as I've done in previous videos, it is impossible to look at Anton Johannesson and not A/B his statistics with his partner Emil Andre. And I will preface this with the fact that I do not have a complete data set on Emil Andre, but I am somewhat comfortable in spotting the trends between these two players, especially considering they played together. For starters, Emil Andre's dangerous shot attempts against rate was 36% better than Anton Johannesson, which, considering Johannesson's profile, is expected. But in terms of offensive dangerous shot attempts for HV71, Anton Johannesson's rate with him on the ice was 120% higher than Emil Andre's. When you remove low danger shot attempts from the equation, Johannesson had a 14% better dangerous shot attempt percentage. His dangerous passes per 60 minutes was over 5 times the rate of Emil Andre. Their completion rates were almost identical, but Anton Johannesson attempted 50% more passes than Emil Andre. Johannesson also participated in 77% more offensive zone transitions per 60 minutes, but the one other area where Andre does have a bit of an advantage is dangerous attempts off of his own stick, which for defensemen is not necessarily something I'm particularly looking for. Anton Johannesson to me is the hockey equivalent of a pinball flipper. Pucks hit him all the time, and he just sends them elsewhere with control all of the time, and he makes those decisions very quickly. He uses his passing to generate breakouts, generate scoring chances, diffuse offensive pressure, move pucks through the neutral zone and into the offensive zone, as well as just simply maintaining possession, especially in the offensive zone. And there's very good mobility, even if the raw speed in a straight line is lacking, which is something that with more strength on his frame and more time to get back from his injuries should come a few steps. He's able to cover the neutral zone effectively, cover a lot of ice by using his feet in fluid stride, and for his profile, he was able to break up a surprising number of transitions, both at the offensive blue line and defensive blue line. But I will grant that Johannesson is small, he plays small, and I think the chances of a really long and successful NHL career are limited. But what he is good at, he is very good at. Passing pucks is always quicker than carrying them around the ice, and having players on the ice who can pass as much as he does and connect on as many passes as he does is absolutely vital. But if what you get out of Anton Johannesson is a real solid power play quarterback that you can play at 5-on-5 in somewhat sheltered minutes and get some decent offense out of, to me, that's not a bad thing, even if he's a guy that you pick in, say, the 3rd round of the draft. And I also feel that this is a player that is a prime case of seeing the forest through the trees. I think that there are some serious downsides to his game, and some of his passing decisions are baffling, but this is a player who missed the vast majority of last season and half of this year. But if you accept his risky tendencies, are patient, and encourage what he does best, he could be a relentless, aggressive, offensive defenseman that could be one of a kind in the National Hockey League. But it is a very big gamble. So that's all for this Scouching Report. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, you can click all the buttons you see below me so you never miss another one. If you really liked it, you could subscribe on Patreon or here on YouTube by clicking join below. You get early access to videos, an exclusive Discord server, data sheets for hundreds of drafted and undrafted prospects, as well as plenty of other goodies, or you could pick up some merchandise from the Scouchwear shop, where 50% of all profits go to the Women's Sports Foundation. So that's all, and thanks for watching.